For years, Lori Loughlin was marketed as something almost rare in celebrity culture, dependable. A familiar face from comfort TV, a symbol of wholesome, a person audiences felt they already understood. Then, in 2019, her name snapped into a totally different kind of headline, one that didn't belong to Hollywood gossip, but to federal court filings. The scandal wasn't a messy breakup or a leaked tape. It was a case about elite college admissions, wealth, and fraud. An investigation with a code name that sounded like a movie, Operation Varsity Blues. Here's the image that makes the story feel so surreal. The same person you associate with sitcom warmth becomes part of a national argument about privilege. Not just privilege in theory, but privilege that allegedly moved money through hidden channels to purchase a better future. Prosecutors said Loughlin and her husband, Massimo Giannulli, paid $500,000 to secure spots for their daughters at the University of Southern California by presenting them as athletic recruits for the USC crew team, even though neither competed in rowing. And once that figure hit the public, the story became bigger than a single family. It became a symbol of what people feared was already true, that the rules weren't the same for everyone. Operation Varsity Blues wasn't just one bad actor or one university. It was a sweeping federal investigation into a broader scheme, with a central figure, college admissions consultant William Rick Singer, accused of arranging bribes and falsified credentials to help clients' children gain admission to selective schools. When the government frames a scandal like that, it signals something important. This isn't a tabloid story. It's a system story. And that's why this case still pulls attention years later. Because it hits a nerve almost everyone recognizes. The fear that merit isn't enough, that the ladder is rigged, and that people with money can purchase a shortcut while everyone else is told to work harder. College admissions is emotional territory. Families plan for it for years. Students attach identity to it. Parents attach meaning to it. So when a celebrity is accused of buying access through the athletic recruit pathway, it doesn't read like a clever hack. It reads like theft from the idea of fairness itself. But the scandal is also complicated in a way the internet rarely wants. Because to understand why someone would risk reputation, career, and freedom, you have to look at the pressure cooker around them. The culture told parents that elite admissions are destiny. The influencer era told families that image is currency. The celebrity machine told stars that they are only as safe as their public brand. And then the admissions machine offered a shadow market, a way to make uncertainty feel controllable if you could afford it. So the question is not only what happened, the question is, what did the system reward? Because in a world where access is a business, there will always be someone selling a shortcut, and always be someone willing to buy it. Tonight, we rebuild the timeline in order. We start with the rise, how Lori Loughlin became a mainstream, safe celebrity, why that image mattered, and why her family's public profile turned the scandal into a cultural event. Then we track the crack. The moment federal prosecutors unsealed the case, the allegations became public, and the story moved from rumor to record. And finally, we follow the fallout, the decision to plead guilty, the sentencing, and the lasting reputational damage that doesn't end when a prison term is served. Because Operation Varsity Blues wasn't only about one actress. It was about what happens when the promise of opportunity becomes a product, and when the public finally gets to see the receipt. Before the scandal, Lori Loughlin's brand was built on familiarity. She was Aunt Becky to an entire generation, someone who lived in the background of family television for years. That kind of fame is different from pop star fame. It's not built on shock or chaos. it's built on trust. And when your public identity is trust, your fall doesn't feel like a normal celebrity stumble. It feels like a betrayal of the role you played in people's heads. The rise matters because it explains why the case became national. Laughlin wasn't an obscure actress getting caught in a niche fraud story. She was a recognizable name linked to a type of celebrity that feels clean. She also existed in a modern ecosystem where her family was part of a wider public narrative, one that included constant public visibility and the pressure to curate an ideal life. That pressure doesn't excuse crime, but it helps explain why the situation became such a cultural mirror. People weren't only judging an action, they were judging an entire lifestyle. The wealthy parent, the elite school obsession, the sense that anything can be purchased if you have enough money. Operation Varsity Blues, as laid out by federal prosecutors, involved alleged bribery and fraud techniques designed to make admissions look legitimate on paper, including the manipulation of athletic recruitment channels. In that environment, athletic recruit becomes a gate, because coaches can help open doors that regular applicants can't touch. And in the allegations tied to Laughlin and Giannulli, the gate was USC crew. Prosecutors said the couple agreed to pay bribes totaling $500,000 so their daughters could be treated as recruits, despite not participating in crew. When the case went public, the immediate reaction wasn't just disbelief, it was humiliation by association. The scandal didn't only name famous parents, it named a method, and the method made people imagine how many similar things might never get caught. That's why the story spread like wildfire. It was both celebrity drama and civic outrage at the same time, a combination that social media eats for breakfast. At first, Laughlin and Giannulli fought the charges. Major reporting later noted they initially resisted before changing course. That detail matters because it shows how denial can harden the story. It's one thing to claim misunderstanding, it's another to go to trial and attempt to win. But the case continued moving, and over time, the pressure shifted from public opinion to legal reality. Evidence, documents, cooperating witnesses. The more a case like this becomes documented, the more the narrative stops being emotional and becomes procedural. And that's where the crack deepened. The public didn't just see a celebrity in trouble. The public saw a wealthy family allegedly trying to secure elite status for their kids through deception. In a country where millions of families treat college admissions as a high-stakes moral test, study, grind, sacrifice, this case read like a cheat code paid for with cash. So the scandal's second layer wasn't the bribery. It was the reaction. Careers freezing, reputations collapsing, and the hard reality that audiences don't separate the character from the person when the crime hits a nerve like fairness. Even if a celebrity returns to work later, the image doesn't reset. It becomes a permanent question mark. What did they think the rules were for them? By the time plea deals entered the story, the rise and fall arc was already set. The only unknown was the ending. Would the system treat these defendants as symbols or as just another case file? Would punishment match the outrage? And would any outcome ever satisfy a public that was really angry at something larger than a single actress? An entire economy of access? In May 2020, the story pivoted from fight to admission. The U.S. Attorney's Office announced that Lori Loughlin and Massimo Giannulli agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy charges connected to securing the fraudulent admission of their 2 children to USC as purported athletic recruits. Laughlin agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud, while Giannulli agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit wire and mail fraud and honest services wire and mail fraud. This wasn't a minor procedural update. It was a public acknowledgement that the case had moved beyond headlines into legal accountability. Then, in August 2020, the consequences became concrete. Federal prosecutors announced that Laughlin and Giannulli were sentenced to 2 months and 5 months in prison, respectively, in connection with securing the fraudulent admission of their daughters to USC as purported athletic recruits. The sentencing details matter because they show the system's message. Even for high-profile defendants, the case was treated as a real crime, not a celebrity slap on the wrist. DOJ reporting also described additional conditions, including fines and supervised release, underlining that punishment wasn't only time. And here's the part that turns outrage into reality. Prison isn't a metaphor. It's a calendar. It's a surrender date. It's the removal of privacy. It's the slow grind of consequences that doesn't care how famous you were. Reuters reported that Laughlin completed her prison term in December 2020, marking a visible end to the incarceration chapter, even as the cultural punishment continued. Because prison time ends. Reputation time doesn't. By this point, the story becomes less about the court and more about what comes after. Laughlin's public identity, built over decades, was forced into a new category, celebrity who became an example. That is a uniquely brutal form of fame because it doesn't depend on current work. It depends on the scandal continuing to be useful as a reference. Anytime a new admissions controversy appears, Operation Varsity Blues gets mentioned again. Anytime someone debates privilege, this story gets revived. That's how cultural memory works. Some scandals become fossils. Others become templates. The bigger legacy question is uncomfortable because it points back at the audience too. Why did this case feel so satisfying to watch? Part of it is that people love seeing the powerful face consequences. But another part is that the story gave the public a clean villain narrative for a messy system. Elite admissions aren't fair even without bribes. They're shaped by legacy preferences, donation networks, tutoring access, school quality, and resources that most families never touch. Operation Varsity Blues didn't invent inequality. It made it visible in a form that could be prosecuted. So what is the real lesson? It's not simply don't cheat. It's that access has a market, and where a market exists, someone will exploit it. The scandal's mechanism, using an athlete recruit label, hit like lightning because it looked like a loophole. But the deeper problem is the same one that fuels every access economy: scarcity. When elite schools are treated as golden tickets, families become desperate, and desperation creates demand for shortcuts. Now for the loop ending. If this scandal had never been caught, would anyone have known? Would the daughter's admissions have looked like a perfectly normal success story? Would the money have been quietly absorbed into the system as donations, and the public kept believing the myth of merit? The most unsettling part isn't that the scheme happened. The most unsettling part is that it worked until it didn't. That's why the story still matters. It's a timeline of a public figure, but it's also a case file on a culture that confuses status with worth. And the final question loops back to the beginning. When fame and money collide with the dream of elite access, what do people believe they're allowed to do? Because the real scandal isn't only who got caught, it's who never will.